My inbox is full. Like, now you read my emails, and when I'm looking at them, the headlines are screaming housing crisis, interest rates, affordability crisis. Oh, but sales are up, but no sales are down, and AI and AI and AI and this merger and the economy. And I don't know about y'all, but it can feel really overwhelming because if you notice that the more emails you get with the louder and louder headlines, the harder it is to figure out what's exactly going on. So I know that consumers are nervous and agents are nervous, but I also know that houses are still selling and real estate is still going on. So the question is, how do you become the correct voice when there's all this confusion in the marketplace? Because let's just be honest, y'all, the headlines are getting a little bit nutso. And in fact, the whole point of this today is help you separate the noise from what you need to pay attention to. So let's start with the first headline from yesterday that was hilarious for a lot of us, that Bed Bath and Beyond is buying Fathom Realty. Now, didn't expect this one, and I got really tickled by James Dwiggins saying this wasn't on his bingo card. I don't think this was on anybody's bingo card, especially knowing that Bed Bath and Beyond had closed down most of their brick and mortar. But then again, you can understand why they would want a real estate company, and they obviously, and no offense, Fathom, they picked one that was going to be pretty inexpensive. So on the multiple, you're not talking a purchase like they didn't get Keller Williams or something like that. So why does Bed Bath and Beyond want a real estate firm? Well, Bed Bath and Beyond thinks that real estate is a commodity. Would you please understand this? Real estate is not a commodity, has never been, and can't really ever be, because houses are not just things, they are places, they are memories, they are where families are created and families fall apart, and it's where people live and do life. And you all know this, if you're in residential real estate, when you're in the door with a buyer and it's the right house, they start sparkling because they can feel it. And yes, it sounds a little bit ooey, and what's the word that the young people use? Anyway, it sounds all new agey and all of that, but it's always been this way. People feel houses, and you can also feel when you've been in a house. I've been in a house that had trafficking in it, and we knew it because the neighbors came over and told us, and the police had just craziness. And when we walked in that house, we could feel so much negative, and it's a house, right? And so when you walk in the door and you can feel that, this is what I need real estate professionals to understand. There's still a buyer for it, but a Bed Bath and Beyond that's going to want to sell your house in their online marketplace, or have their online partner sell you the house in the online marketplace for some kind of a discount or connection or whatever, they can never grasp the emotional thing that goes on with houses. So I would imagine this will happen again. And by the way, y'all, this is probably your setup for seeing Amazon get into real estate, and probably they'll go with somebody big like Keller Williams because they're probably the only one big enough to buy Gary out. So there's that headline, kind of a crazy one, but here we are. And then I saw this headline that the FHA director is talking about, oh, yeah, we need more houses. We don't need more subsidies. Can we please, at some point, we have got people to get them to, I can't speak straight this morning. At some point, we are going to have to get people to understand that a big part of our housing crisis is not the supply side. The only answer you are hearing from elected officials is that we need more houses, but none of them have the stones to address the fact that we still have an unknown millions of people in the country who aren't supposed to be here. Now, that does not mean that I'm against immigration. So before you get all wound up in the comments, just understand that any country is going to be taken out if you have a huge influx that does not assimilate. And that's what's been going on. And so if you look at the housing crisis that we have and the way prices have been driven up, more subsidies, well, who's going to get them? I'm just going to ask you that, because we already have a problem where it's not a level playing field for everybody. And if we actually did see the people in this country illegally who are taking jobs from Americans, they're gone. What would happen to the housing crisis? Well, suddenly you'd have houses on the market and suddenly prices would fall. We would be having an entirely different conversation, but we're not supposed to have that conversation, right? We're not supposed to talk like that. We're supposed to assume everything has to stay artificially high and that we have to make everything denser and denser and denser. What if some communities don't want density? Just saying, that's what you're going to have to be willing to talk about. Now, I did find this one to be interesting, and high five Home Depot because this headline was helpful. Home Depot is talking about what's happening in housing from their perspective of selling gadgets and home improvement items. And we've all known this for years. In real estate, anytime a house sells, you have anywhere between 65 and $100,000 of additional economic activity that happens from somebody painting, buying flooring, or just going to Home Depot or Lowe's over and over and over. So they're seeing the challenges in their stores from people not making purchases. So I'm glad to see that there is a voice from outside of real estate that's not just buying realtors up, but is looking at the bigger economic situation that happens when houses don't sell. Okay, so then this one was interesting to me, and you're going to have to be paying attention. So whoever's watching my videos that doesn't is a political person, if you're in state, you're going to have to be at least moderately political. All right. Because we have major policy decisions that are happening. And I don't know that there is a very loud outcry going on. Now, in this one, we're talking about Massachusetts, where they're looking at statewide rent control. For those of you who don't know the history on rent control, it has never worked. You can look at all the research. It doesn't matter if the institution is left leaning or right leaning. All of the data, all of the white papers, historically, rent control does not work. And here's why. When you tell the market what it can and can't choose to charge, then the market assumes it's controlling every other input. However, when you have a situation where rents are frozen, what happens when property taxes go up? Because in general, notice this, the same politicians who want rent control are also the same ones that want higher property taxes. What a coinkydink! Isn't that so cute? And we know that if you freeze rents and a property owner gets increased property taxes, they're just expecting that landlord to eat it. Why? Why? Well, they make the assumption that every landlord is a BlackRock. Well, they're not. The bulk of your affordable housing units in the country that are for rent are owned by mom and pops. They're not owned by big hedge funds. The hedge funds like the A-class apartments, big shiny ones with floor to ceiling glass and hardwoods and granite countertops. They don't want the stuff that mom and pop investors buy. And when rent freezes come into place, those landlords are not operating on huge margins, y'all. Property management and owning rental properties is a very low margin business because you have a lot of inputs you're dealing with. You got property taxes, you've also got maintenance. And by the way, those same units that tend to be the most affordable in every marketplace are also the ones that need the most maintenance work. Good landlords do their maintenance. They are not slumlords. They do take care of properties. But if they're facing increased cost of labor and materials to fix things like roofs and leaks from a plumber and the water heater that's not draining into the crawl space, it's draining onto the kitchen floor, stuff that has to get fixed. So it costs them more to fix it, and their taxes are up, and the tenants are frozen on rents. What's going to happen is that those landlords are either going to let the properties go down and create a blight and frankly create a worse living situation for those tenants, or they're going to sell the properties and walk away. So who buys them? I mean, I don't think BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street and Blackstone and that crowd really wants to own some of the C-class properties that are out there, but maybe they do. And I'm not in favor of them owning any more real estate, frankly, even though there's now legislation that wants them to, oh yeah, own anything. And I don't want them to own anything, but this is a problem. So anyway, that's the backstory on rent control. Massachusetts wants it statewide. And the key real estate group they're talking about here is not the realtors. The Greater Boston Board of Realtors has been very vocal against rent control. So good job, Greater Boston. This is why your local realtor associations are the most important voice for real estate, because you know what's happening in your markets and they know the whole Boston market and know that if you damage the most affordable units, you're hurting the people who need that housing. Well, this group was the apartment group. So they're speaking up saying, hey, maybe we'll just do some rent control and we'll do some freezes. Look, y'all, you cannot negotiate with terrorists. And the people who want rent control, they're terrorists. So pay attention in your marketplace. See if your area is looking at rent control. If they are, start speaking against it. And if they aren't, then count yourself lucky. All right, next up, we have, well, this one's kind of personal to me. I'm just going to say it. There was a headline here that the CEO of NAR at the legislative meetings, which happened this past week, says there's opposition within and that's a strength. Really? What about the people who weren't really opposition, but were inside the organization, just wanted it to be stronger and had something to say, but were cast out into the outer darkness and can't get a phone call back from leadership? Oh, okay. Oh, wait, do I know that person? Oh, yeah. If it's a strength, just saying. Okay, so then also we have this headline. Oh, let's not revive. I can't read without my glasses on, y'all. This is so embarrassing. Let's not revive the predatory mortgages that Barney Frank eliminated. So first of all, let's don't lionize Barney Frank. The Frank Dodd Act was the single biggest problem we've seen ongoing in the markets, and we know that. They got their legislation, they got their money, they moved on, and God rest his soul because he has moved on to the great reward, whatever his great reward is. But what they're talking about here are what we loved calling ninja loans. Now, if you happen to watch this video and you're a consumer or a younger realtor, you don't know the ninjas that we used to have. That was no income, no job, no assets. And actually, we should have called them ninja peas. No problem. They could get a mortgage for any reason at all. And in fact, the single best movie I've ever seen about the economic meltdown is the one with Brad Pitt in it, that I just forgot because I'm of middle age. Somebody will have to toss it into the comments. It's really good. All I remember is Brad Pitt's in it. How embarrassing is this? Oh, and somebody else famous. Look, okay, I'm not obviously good for this. Watch that video, but you see the mortgage lenders that were giving loans to the strippers because there was no reason not to. They made a lot of money, and then the houses went to foreclosure. What they're warning against here is any of those no doc stated income loans, and let's don't bring back the mortgages that have crazy adjustable rates. And I totally agree that we shouldn't bring back those predatory mortgages. But I just want to point something out here. And I didn't know it until recently that an H-1B visa holder apparently does not need a credit score to purchase a house. They're also not here permanently. So are we putting our H-1B visa holders at risk by giving them loans with no credit score when the visa program could end at any day, good Lord willing? And if that were to happen, there's not a benefit, there's a side effect of people who lose their homes to foreclosure. The side effect is the neighbors. And we really never talk about that in foreclosure world, is that when some houses go down to foreclosure, the neighbors are going to feel a suppression of their equity as well, simply because foreclosures have negative impact on the marketplace. So this article did have some good insights on that. Might be worth reading, particularly if you were not around during the market run up or the rundown that happened. And then the last one I want to go over with y'all briefly was this headline. And literally, y'all, all of these headlines came across my box over the last 3 days. Craziness. That at the National Association of Realtors legislative meetings, they had the White House technology chief there, and he was telling realtors they should be using AI and telling them that if you don't, you're going to be left behind and you can't run a business without it. And my least favorite thing in this article, which I thought was absolutely crazy, was that they're looking at some data from Ramp, which is an online company that does things. And Ramp was telling them that they can tell which companies use AI and that their sales go up, and the ones that don't, their sales are stagnant. And y'all, that is some crap. I mean, come on, causation and correlation. I mean, correlation is not causation. Causation is not correlation. I don't know. Correlation is not causation. That's not necessarily so. Now, AI is baked into everything that we're doing. It's baked into your iPhone. It's baked into this live stream. It's baked in everywhere. I get that. However, I think your really smart real estate agents and brokerages will understand that since real estate's not a commodity. So look at me. I made a loop for you guys. With real estate not being a commodity item, the best people in real estate still understand the human connectivity involved. Now, it doesn't mean you can't use AI to improve your systems and your processes and to give you a starting point and ask it questions, but to have it prepare your full listing presentation would be nuts because AI hasn't been inside that neighborhood. And to ask it to put together a negotiating strategy how is AI going to do a negotiating strategy on a property? So you realize that the limitations are there, and that if you are savvy, you will continue doing what's working for you, and you'll learn some things that might help you. But I'm just going to say, I don't think the best use of AI for real estate is people using it to make new headshots and to make memes of themselves, because that's using up groundwater for memes. So if we're going to use AI, can we just use it responsibly? And I'll just say here, I do find it kind of interesting that the White House is pressing on the use of AI. And this is, of course, the same administration that's currently building a data center under the ballroom. And if you're not up to speed on that, then we should talk. Let me know in the comments if this is helpful to you. If you like hearing about the headlines in real estate, but most importantly, just know this: when there's noise out there, there's a way to cut through it, and when you cut through it, man, everything's not actually doom and gloom. There's some really good bright spots out there, and they're brought to you by your friends, your humans, and your neighbors.